So today we're going to talk about the Constitution, how the Bill of Rights fit into and was wedged into the Constitution, and whether or not that was a good thing. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Mish Men. I am Adam Mauser, and my partner in crime to my immediate right, Mr. Dusty Labar.
Hello, everybody.
Hope you enjoyed last week's episode. It was really good about differences in opinion with respect to facts, and it's centered around Graham Hancock, outside the system guy, and Flint Dibble. So really good. Hopefully you listen to it. If not, do listen to it, and our episode, and then do your own research.
Yep. Yeah. Listen, read, research, do it all.
That's right. Be open to another idea, but not so open your assumptions fall out.
That's fair.
So we are going to talk about the Constitution today and how the Bill of Rights came to be and what the impacts were of the Bill of Rights. I've talked about this a little bit in other podcasts about the assumptions of the framers going into the Constitution. And I've dipped my toe in it, but I thought it's a topic worth discussing. But before we get started, I'm going to read the preamble, and we're going to circle back to that later on.
Okay. The
preamble to the Constitution, anyway. It's not the preamble to Adam Mauser's way of thinking. So the preamble is very short. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty, do to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So that kind of sets the whole tone for the whole thing, the Constitution, that is. And so it's the people saying, we're going to form this government, and more perfect union. If you recall, we were operating at the time under the Articles of Confederation, which were very weak. So the Articles of Confederation, they were established in 1781 during the Revolutionary War. So Revolutionary War is still going on. They had the individual colonies that formed a continental army that were fighting against the British, and they formed that Articles of Confederation. But it was a very weak federal government, very weak. They couldn't lay taxes on people or states. They couldn't enforce any laws at the federal level, which sounds kind of good right now, but we'll get more on that later. So in 1787, Madison and Hamilton, that's James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, they convinced the Congress to scrap the Articles of Confederation. The states and the people at the time knew that there was trouble. So, hey, why don't we make some modifications to these articles, because this ain't working. We have this huge Revolutionary War debt. So they needed to do something because they weren't able to pay off their debt because, again, no taxes. So they convinced Congress to scrap the whole idea. So they were sent there, the delegates were sent there to amend their articles. And Madison and Hamilton, once they convened, said, we really need this new thing. And so that's why James Madison is considered the framer of the Constitution. In 1788, the Constitution was ratified by the states, and then it took effect in 1789. And then James Madison submitted 39 amendments because of this back and forth, and that's what we're going to talk about initially. Congress passed 12, but only 10 were ratified by the states.
Okay.
That was the Bill of Rights. So a little brief history. So in that mix of the Constitution all the way up to 1791, where those 10 amendments were ratified, that's kind of where we're starting out at. But the conversation was dominated by two groups of people, Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So your Federalists, that was Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. And they did a number of writings. They would write under the pseudonym Publius, and they would write in newspapers, circulars, that sort of thing, articles that supported this idea of a stronger federal government, again, because they had all these issues. And then the Anti-Federalists, Patrick Henry, Richard Henry Lee, if you remember him from history.
Richard Henry Lee.
Yeah.
No.
I think he was the grandfather of Robert E. Lee.
Oh,
I think.
okay.
Yeah. He was from Virginia. James Mason, the famous actor from North by Northwest and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. No, it was George Mason. There's a school with a fine law school, George Mason University in the D.C. area. And Robert Yates. Robert Yates is a big New York guy. So that was the anti-federalists.
They were like weak federal government or weak.
They wanted a weaker federal government because
central government.
They were in fear of encroachment.
Yeah,
that's what they were in fear of.
They look so stupid now.
Well, but we'll get to it in a second. So the Federalists, they were kind of a congealed group of the brain trust, basically, those three. Not that there wasn't anybody else that was a Federalist. George Washington was a Federalist. John Adams was a Federalist. Benjamin Franklin. And then you had the anti-Federalists. And in general, the Federalists came from highly populated areas, and the anti-Federalists more mercantile, more farmers, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they didn't want this federal control.
Sure.
So they came up with this idea. From the output of that was the Bill of Rights. And you've heard me talk before about the assumption going in to our Constitution is the people have the power, and we're going to ordain, or we're going to establish what this government can do, and everything else belongs to us. That's the gist of it. So one of the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton wrote this one, published under Publius, number 84. So look this up if you want to. I just read it last night, preparing for this. And what he argues, it's very sound. And what he warns of, basically, in other writings, is what we might be seeing today. So, but back to the Constitution versus something like the Magna Carta. A lot of what the framers knew, they were very well-read people. And they, a lot of the goodness from things like the Magna Carta made it into the thinking that formed the Constitution. The Magna Carta was by the point of sword. These barons, landowning barons in Merry England, they went to King John and said, this has got to stop because we have these unreasonable searches. We get people held just because you want them held. So the assumption is you have a monarch. It's this God-ordained monarch, and it's this royal bloodline, and it's passed down through your posterity, this bloodline. And all information, all rights come from this source. But we want you to list some rights that are important to us. So that's the thinking coming out of the Magna Carta and every other document up to that time. So it presupposes a monarchy. So in a republic, what you have is that the people are the source of power. We own all the power, and we're telling the government what to do. So the Constitution was written from that perspective, that we are going to tell the government what areas they are allowed, the federal government, what areas they're allowed to rule on and consider and make laws on and execute those laws. So it seemed ridiculous to guys like Hamilton and Madison and Jay that you'd want to list out make a list of rights. And it's interesting when you look at the Soviet Constitution, it had a long laundry list of rights, just like the Magna Carta has some rights. But what that means is if those rights aren't listed, you don't have them. And if you think of today, like what's the thinking of today when it comes to rights?
What do you mean? In what
so,
way?
like where they come from, and
I think we talked about it very briefly before. I think most people think the rights come from the government, right? They give you the rights. They give
like it says in the Constitution, I can have a gun.
Yeah, correct. That the government gave you that right.
The government ordained it. They said that you can do that.
Yeah. And which means if they said that you can do it, then they should be able to take it away. In that thought process. They can take it away. Yeah.
So all in all republics, all power is sourced from the people. The powers do not, and not enumerated. They still belong to the people. So Alexander Hamilton in that Federalist 84 listed three major areas why the Bill of Rights was unnecessary. So one was habeas corpus. So that's the man being called out. So safeguards freedom against arbitrary law and lawless action. So I can't just like haul you into court and charge you with stuff that I don't have evidence for, because someone's going to rule independently out of it. So habeas corpus, and it applied to the large group. Let's say in the Civil War, it happened at other times where they suspend habeas corpus for a region or a state or a group. They suspend them so they get reduced rights or maybe even no rights because at a time of war. Another area that Alexander Hamilton talked on, and that he was referring to the New York Constitution at the time. There was a prohibition of ex post facto laws. So ex post facto meaning after the fact. You can't haul somebody in, or they do this thing. Let's say they wear purple sweaters, and then you make a law, and they stop wearing purple sweaters. Let's say you make a law a month from now that says if you wear a purple sweater, you're going to jail, straight to jail. But he might have got rid of his purple sweater. He doesn't wear it anymore, but they can't haul that guy into court because he used to wear purple sweaters. It came after the fact. And then titles of nobility. The framers rejected the whole concept of nobility. It's capricious, and that God ordains rights of men, not government.
Yeah.
So those three things, those are the three areas he touched on. But check out Federalist number 84 if you get a chance, because it talks about why Bill of Rights unnecessary. So the general theme of the Constitution, the people lose nothing. They surrender nothing. They abdicate nothing, and they retain everything else. I enumerate powers. So it's kind of like, I was trying to think of an analogy that would fit both ways. But for you hear, have you heard the term like negative liberties? The Constitution is a document of negative liberties. Some people will quote that. So negative liberties would be like a puzzle, and puzzle, you got different pieces and it makes up a picture. That is that are the sum total of all liberties, let's say. And what the people said, they're the person putting together the puzzle. Here's the puzzle, and it makes this picture. I'm going to leave out one piece, and that makes up the Constitution. Everything else belongs to us. Every other possible right, every other possible liberty, except for this one little area. That's the only area of government that you can rule in. Everything else belongs to the state or the people. Throat's a little dry from all this talking. So that's the assumption: all rights belong to the people. And very briefly, let me run through the Bill of Rights, and we'll talk about that. If anyone you want to double down on, that's fine. First Amendment, it's about establishing religion. I'm sorry, make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That can be construed two ways: that you won't form a national religion, say, well, you have to be Catholic to live in this land, or the prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So basically, they have no jurisdiction. Jurisdiction means literally, if you translate it literally, legal speak. I don't have the authority to speak on that legally. Jurisdiction. The federal government cannot tell you that you can't go worship, or how you worship, unless you're killing somebody in that worship.
Unless it infringes on somebody else's rights.
Right. Yeah. Or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Those are two, they mention them separately: freedom of speech or of the press. The press is not somebody that the government ordains either. The government can't say, well, you're not a credentialed press person, so you can't write on this topic, or what you wrote was offensive to the government. You're inciting. Can't do it.
Okay. So if the government tells the press what to say, is that against the Bill of Rights?
It is illegal.
It's illegal.
Yeah, it's illegal.
Yeah, gotcha.
Good. And if they abridge the press, if they, let's say, go to, I don't know, a social media company.
Yeah.
And they say, hey, you can't be talking bad about these vaccines.
This is very hypothetical.
It's purely hypothetical. I just drew that one up. Like the purple sweaters.
Yeah.
Just made it up.
Yeah, in line with that analogy. Got it.
That took a while to think of that.
Yeah.
Or if, like what's going on in Brazil, it's literally going on Brazil, where the Brazilian Supreme Court guy is telling Twitter, formerly Twitter, now X, what they can and can't report on.
Yikes.
And so it's getting very scary down. Michael Schellenberger is doing a lot of good reporting on that now.
Is Brazil a democracy?
I can't remember what they are. They're not.
If you had asked me, I wouldn't have put any money on it. I have no idea.
They're not like us.
Sure.
I think they're even more corrupted than us.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's pretty corrupted. But yeah, they're having big problems down there. And Elon Musk weighed in on X and said that he needs to protect his people and protect free speech. Another clause of that First Amendment, the right of the people peaceably to assemble. There were folks. There was a funny little reel on social media where Chris Cuomo was. They were talking about the riots. Remember back in the 2020 election, pre-2020 election, people were rioting, looting, burning down buildings, just rampant crime.
Assembly.
And so he says, where does it say in the Constitution that you can't riot and that sort of thing? And so this guy, he's literally eating like dried ramen cake, like it comes out of the package, and he's like chewing on it. And he like in the background of his video, he's got the First Amendment.
Yeah.
He says it's right here, peaceably, right there, Mr. Cuomo. Yeah. It was hilarious.
Yeah, that's funny.
Or to petition the government for redress of grievances. So we have all those rights. Again, government doesn't say who's press.
Yeah.
We're, in effect, the press.
Yeah.
Because we produce content and we talk about news.
Yeah.
We're the press. No one has to wave their magic wand and say, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist.
You're press. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. And we also have this thing called freedom of speech. Number 2, one of my favorites, and 2 protects 1, and 1 protects 2. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, not for personal protection, a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. It doesn't say firearms. It doesn't say guns. It doesn't say. So is cannon arms? Yeah. Yeah. Is a tank arm? Is an Apache helicopter arms? Yeah. 100%. Yeah. Right. Arms. That's what it is.
Right. As long as it doesn't hold more than 12 bullets.
Yeah. Yeah. There's others like about quartering troops in your house. Can't do that unless it's prescribed by law. 4th is search and arrest. 5th is rights in criminal cases. 6 is right to a fair and speedy trial. Literally says speedy trial. Rights in civil cases. And then number 8 is excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment. They list the fines and the fees imposed, bail and fines, which is interesting because that's come up of news of late when Trump's trial. They were trying to fine him or bail at like $454 million, and they reduced it down to $174 million or something like that. Yeah. Nice. It's actually, that is excessive. Yeah. Now, I know excessive to one might not be excessive to another, but if you think about.
Yeah, because he's running for president. He's not a flight risk.
Right.
Yeah. That's all right.
Number 9, this is the one that's key. And this is, so if you remember back to what we were just talking about, Hamilton says these Bill of Rights, or what became the Bill of Rights, absolutely unnecessary because it presupposes the rights come from the people. We're telling the government, you can operate over here. That's it. That's all you got.
Yeah.
So 9 was the enumeration, and I'm reading it word for word. The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. Which, that's pretty plain. Anyone could. You don't have to be a legal scholar to understand those words. You don't have to be a Middle or Old English expert to understand those words. We've enumerated these things that the government can rule on and what they control in their area. Everything else belongs to the people.
Yeah.
All those rights. And all these rights that we listed in the Constitution up to this point, that doesn't mean that's where your right's in.
Yeah.
Like, I have a right to privacy. Yeah. You have a right to privacy. It doesn't have to say you have a right.
It's just a right.
It's
a God-given
It's a right.
Yeah.
Like, it's none of your business. That's my property.
Yeah.
And then 10 kind of expands on that a little bit further and extends it to the states. The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people.
Can I ask maybe a dumb question?
Let's discuss.
Just so I'm clear on it. You're saying James Madison said, we don't need this because the government shouldn't rule on anything that has to do with this. So it's unnecessary. He's saying those things, we don't even need to write them down because the government should have nothing to do with those.
Alexander Hamilton argued most prominently about it, but then James Madison, a document that he wrote while in Congress as a representative at the House. So it wasn't a Federalist paper, but what he argued was, okay, well, what we're going to do, what we laid out in this 9th Amendment and the 10th Amendment, but specifically the 9th, the Constitution bounds the federal government into this tight little ball.
Yeah.
And everything else belongs to the people.
Yeah, so he's saying this is not needed. Like it's
unnecessary.
Taken care of. It's already taken care of. He's saying this is just extra work you don't need to do you're doing it for no reason. That's what he's saying. Gotcha. That's what I thought. That's what I thought he was saying.
Yeah.
He's saying we already got everybody covered. They don't need to worry about anything.
Right.
You don't need to write these things down.
And it's not even if you don't have to adopt some strange assumption. Mm-hmm. The assumption was because the people built the government. Mm-hmm. There wasn't this guy that claimed to be divinely appointed to be the head of this federal government or the head of the states or the colonies. And he said, well, this is the way I think it should be. And they all agreed. Mm-hmm. The people built the government. Mm-hmm. Literally, they elected representatives at various times while they were still colonies. And eventually they ended up here. So the people built a government. Mm-hmm. So that's the way it had worked. And then what the Anti-Federalists argued, well, if we don't list our rights, they're going to get taken from us.
That's right.
My take on it is the Anti-Federalists, what they were arguing for, it was self-defeating. Mm-hmm. That what they did was, because we became a more ignorant society about the structure of government and whether or not that was just out of apathy or laziness, but out of... or if it was a concerted effort over time to just like get the people used to. I think it might have been a mix of both. People just taking advantage of, nobody's paying attention to what we're doing here. Yeah. We need to take more control during the progressive era, which was late 1800s, early 1900s. And I want to do another podcast on that. So you now get to the point where people actually think that the rights they come from the government.
Yeah, like this Bill of Rights came from the government. Yeah, they're like, here's your stuff that you can do.
Right, and the fact that they stuck all that list in there makes the lazy or the inattentive assume that rights do come from the government. If they never had the Bill of Rights, if they just said, you know what, we're going to do that.
Yeah,
it's stupid.
Yeah,
for the reason that Alexander Hamilton argued, would we be in the position that we're in today? That's a thought-provoking question.
Yeah, you're saying if they didn't go through the process of saying how important it was to list these rights out, if it would be better than it is right now.
Right.
Because the government was constricted to something, and you're saying this gives the government more latitude to do different stuff outside of these 10 things. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that the people incorrectly assumed over time.
Yeah.
It didn't happen like the next day.
Yeah.
If they never said, okay, well, we have these rights, and those are our only rights now.
Yeah, right. I got you. You're saying the only rights. There's more than these rights.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that's what one of them says, which gets ignored a lot.
Yeah. It's really funny because even the government now, if you like thought that the government gave you these rights and these are your rights, that even the one that it gets argued probably the most, well, maybe not the most, but one of the most is the right to bear arms.
Yeah.
And the government even then is like, well, you shouldn't. I mean, hunting rifles are okay.
Yeah.
One shot at a time.
And you can go to a shooting range.
Yeah. But really, legitimately, like, should be able to own whatever you want for whatever reason you know, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody else.
Right.
Yeah. That's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
So I think this was a mistake. I think the Bill of Rights was a mistake. I think it was because if we would have, and this is just a purely hypothetical, we said, you know what, Anti-Federalists, I agree that we could have problems, but if we train our children and if we order the rest of our lives based off of we the people built the government. The government can't intrude on us, and we took seriously the concepts from the First and Second and some of these other amendments, and we took seriously about that, and we trained ourselves and educated ourselves, we wouldn't be in this predicament we're in right now.
Yeah, that's right. That's fair.
And there's a lot of assumptions in there that we would continue to do that generation after generation.
Teaching your children teach their children.
Yes.
This is the way it goes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I gotcha. That makes sense.
So let's fast forward a little bit. And this is more an extension of what I was just saying. So administrative state, I think it's not a huge assumption. And I think most of the listeners would agree that we live in an administrative state. So we literally have laws on the federal books about water volume in washing machines, about gas can nozzles.
Yeah, it's wild.
You literally, according to U.S. code, can't wash fish in a national forest sink that's not a fish washing faucet.
What a funny rule.
Right. And harken back to my puzzle analogy where our liberties are everything else on the puzzle except for that one little piece where he said, yeah, you can stay in their federal government, but that's it.
Yeah.
That is it. That's as far as you can go. No further. Why? Well, I got guns. If you come at us, the people, then we're going to remove you. We're going to impeach you because we have the power of impeachment. And later on, we can bring charges against you if you violated our rights that we have that are all of the other ones, not just
these 10.
Not just these 10.
Yeah.
So we're ruled by this administrative state, and it was fairly exhibited during the whole quarantine.
Yeah.
Granted, most of that wasn't the federal government, except for the fact that the federal government was restricting speech on all social media.
Yeah.
You were ignored by their proxies and by their the stewards and the big fanboys of the federal government. And how do they do that? Well, they do that through OSHA regulation.
Yeah.
And they do that through implied pressure from who they pick as dedicated press people to tell their story through the whole quarantine process and the COVID vaccine process. You were ignored. You were lampooned if you disagreed with them. And they were literally in California and other places like Canada, they were restricting when you could worship, or they were restricting for your safety.
Yeah.
Where you could be.
Yep.
And it's counter to everything that's in the Constitution. The whole concept of it is counter. The only way that can happen, though, is over time. If they had tried to pull that stunt during quarantines, immediately after the adoption of the Constitution and the ratification of it, they would have been laughed out. Oddly enough, there were several pandemics during the time of the Revolution all the way up to like the 1800s. There were like 9 smallpox and other type pandemics. No mention of this is what we're going to do now.
Yeah.
We're going to change the Constitution for your safety.
Right.
So go ahead.
Do you think more people are pushing back on it now? Like the government's infringement on rights than maybe in the past 20 years?
Yes.
Yeah, I agree.
100%.
I think that's true.
I think, and I've said this before in this podcast and other venues, usually just idle chit chat.
Yeah.
That this whole episode, it was just enough information to fire up a group of folks that this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
They can't do this. We can't have this whole administrative network that says you can cut hair, you can have a business, you can do this, you can do that. And if you don't follow my rules because of safety, like OSHA rules, then I'm going to remove your license and you can't do business.
Right.
Or you can't do business with the federal government as a federal contractor.
Right.
I'm going to remove your license and you're not going to get your money, and your stockholders are not going to get their money. So of course there's going to be influence for people to enforce an illegal mandate.
Yeah, I think I think it made them, in the movie 300, where you saw that movie, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I need to watch it again.
Yeah, when King Leonidas said, I'm going to show the world that I can make a god bleed.
Yeah.
And he throws a spear, and it doesn't kill him, but it kind of, rallies the troops.
Yeah.
I think about that a lot, because when there was a huge amount of people that when they said you have to get vaccinated or you're going to lose your job, and they were just like, okay. go ahead.
Yeah.
And then the government had to, because, you know, ultimately what it all boils down to is money, right? I mean, that's what it all boils down to. And then when these people were like, if we lose all these workers, and then the government immediately was like, we were just joking.
Yeah.
It wasn't
really.
It was for your safety, but now we're seeing some things are relaxing. We're not going to make you get it. But I think that was like a wake up call for a lot of people. Like,
it was.
There's going to be people that just don't do it.
Right. And
so that's what I think about a lot is from that movie where he's like, I'm going to, you know, Leonidas didn't kill the Persian king, but he bled. And
he wasn't a god.
It was enough to rally the rest of the Spartan troops to come to their aid, and you know what I mean.
And we still talk about that today.
Mm-hmm.
So somebody that's interested more in safety might look at Leonidas that's standing next to him like, "Are you crazy?
Yeah.
We're all gonna die here."
Yeah.
So what difference does it make? Well, it makes a difference because you and I are talking about it today.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good analogy too to what's going on. It's like there's like the 300 Spartans were going to take on the Persian army of thousands,
which was a superpower at the time.
And so but they were like, no, we think that we're going to stand up to them. And that's a real story.
Yeah.
That's a real story. I know it's a movie, but it's a real thing that happened.
Real story.
Because it was really invigorating for me just as a person to see that people are like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like my job didn't push that pressure on me. I didn't have to make that decision. But I completely understand that for some people, that was probably a really hard decision.
Dude, I don't know if you remember this. So at the height of the mandate, like where I was literally getting a letter that said, you got to do it or you're going to lose your job. We met, I forget where we met, but we were just having a beer someplace. And I was opening up to you about this because I didn't know what your thoughts on the vaccine mandate were or the vaccine in general. And basically what I was asking you is like, hey, if I get fired, can I work for you? I'll swing a hammer. I don't care. I don't care what I do, really.
Yeah.
And I was like looking at various different things, like what can I do to put food on the table and keep my family sheltered and protect them that doesn't require this. And that's one of I was looking at many options, but that was one of them for sure.
I think because there was more people like that than anybody anticipated. Because, you know, when you say you're going to take somebody's money or their ability to make money away from them, like you assume that they're going to balk, like they're going to give up. But it was the reverse.
Right.
You got
Well, I don't know if it was a reverse. It was a reverse for a small population that said, nope, I'm not doing it.
But excuse me, exactly like the movie reference I was giving or the historical reference, even though it was a fact that small people didn't balk and made the government balk, then everybody, more people jump on that side because they're like, oh yeah,
exactly.
They can't do this.
So now more people saw that this other group did not comply.
Yep.
And they're like, hey, those guys didn't comply, and it rallies. Rallies folks.
And not only did they not comply, but also nothing happened to them.
Yeah.
Like nothing happened.
Yeah, I'm like on my third or fourth winter of death survival. I need to start printing T-shirts. So, I need to talk to Kat.
Like, perfect. Yeah, get her to print them. But like nothing, like nobody did anything. They just let you keep your job.
Well, I left.
But I mean, like most people were just like, yeah, we can't do it. And so everybody was like, oh, they didn't do anything.
Some people did get fired for
sure.
not complying. Yeah,
for sure. Some people, like some companies had to take a jump. There were some people that took a jump ahead and like, you had to do this. But yeah, I mean, it's refreshing. I think right now I'm like, people are more like in tune on what's going on, and versus it was even before COVID hit, because they didn't understand that like, here's the reality in my brain. If a virus comes along tomorrow, that is, if you go outside, there's 100% chance it'll kill you. 100%. Mm-hmm. If you walk outside of your door, it'll kill you. If somebody still wants to walk outside, it's on them.
Yeah.
It's not on me.
Well, I'm definitely doing it.
But I mean, like, even if they could prove it, be like, everybody that walks outside dies.
Yeah.
If you still want to do it, like
it's on you. Yeah.
They shouldn't fine you or make you lose your job or do whatever. It's like, if you want to do it, it's on you.
If you want to gather together and walk outside together.
It's on. Yeah.
Hey, it's on you guys, all of you.
Y'all can do it.
So I'm just going to read a laundry list of, not verbatim, but so we literally, looking at today, we literally have an invasion through the border.
Mm-hmm.
Literally, that's undeniable now. Military age males, and they're getting sequestered in these cities and given a whole bunch of stuff. Mm-hmm. Regular employees and citizens are given short shrift. So that's going on. We literally, this weekend, they passed a bill in the House to give tens of $billions of dollars to Ukraine and some to Israel. They're literally funding Ukraine before they and do we have problems in here that we could use some of that funding? 100%.
Yeah, of course.
We're taxed to death. We talked about taxes earlier with income tax, sales tax, debt tax, payroll tax for Social Security. That's a joke. Corporate tax, property tax, capital gains tax, all of those things. The Fed continues to devalue the dollar. So we have this group of independent bankers that I would argue, and I'm not alone in that they're literally a central bank, which are dangers. Many wars and battles were fought over central banks, either sponsored by a central bank or fighting against. Andrew Jackson, a lot of his presidency, he was going to kill the idea of a central bank, and he did. But most folks point to, well, he was a racist because he hated Indians. That's beside the point. He fought against the central bank and won. He was almost assassinated. And they continue to devalue the dollar. They print more and more money. So if I took a bar of gold or a unit of gold, whatever that unit is, I didn't do the math on this. In 1950, I could buy a house back then.
Yeah.
If I take the same amount of gold, I could buy a house like that today. But when you look at the dollar amount of a house, $1,200 average in 1950, and what's the average today? $300K?
Oh, yeah, at least, yeah.
Yeah. They're printing too much money, and all that does is devalue the dollar. So every dollar that you try to save is worth less.
Yeah.
So you got to do more and more work to make sure you have enough of these dollars that are just fiat currency. So that's the state of affairs today, not exhaustive by any means, but that's some fairly interesting ones. You remember our term heuristic from...
Heuristic
From logic?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly what
like
it
a
is.
rule of thumb.
Yeah, gotcha.
So there's some letters that are common to thumb and heuristic, so maybe that helps. That helps me. The T and the H, when I see heuristic, I think thumb,
Okay.
rule of thumb. So there's a heuristic that Stafford Beer came up with, and I love this. He calls it the POSIWID. Purpose of a system is what it does. A mnemonic device. Purpose of a system is what it does. You can't say that the purpose of the system is what it fails to do continually. The purpose of the system is what it actually does. What is the purpose of our government? I led off the whole conversation reading the preamble. The purpose of the federal government that they ordained, that we, the people, ordained, was to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, think riots, provide for the common defense, think invasion, promote the general welfare, think money, secure the blessings of liberty, think our safety just walking down the street in some of these big cities, to ourselves and our posterity. That's you and me.
Yeah.
Do ordain and establish it. That's the purpose of the Constitution. It's been subverted over the years.
Yeah.
It wasn't overnight. It wasn't last week. It wasn't 40 years ago. It was over a long period. And again, we're going to get to that progressive era. We're going to drill a little bit on that because that affected many areas, not just government.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the purpose of the system of this government is not for our welfare. It's not for our liberty. It's not for justice. It's not for anything to do with us. It's for some elite ruling class.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I think I don't know who said it, but there's like, just like you said, it happens over time, which is why you don't want to end up giving like emergency power to any kind of, because when they get a little bit, they want more. And I think over time they got a little bit here and they were like, oh that worked. That's better for us. And they take a little bit more. But I feel like there's probably a great anxiety to be those people because you're teetering on the edge of like, how far can we push these people? Because really the reality is there's way more of us than there are of them.
There are.
By a huge margin, by a margin that's, massive. So like you have to play that game. What they're doing is playing a game. It's like, how far can we push them to can we continue to push them to keep taking? Or do we accidentally push them so far on one thing where they all just band together and then we're screwed? Then all this stuff that we've been working on can be gone. That's what a revolution is. All these people,
right? All
of a sudden put, you know what? It's not cool that you charge me 45% on a capital gains tax. It's my risk.
Yeah.
You shouldn't charge me that or whatever it is. taking my guns, whatever it could be. So there's probably which is probably why they balked on the firing people, is you can't, that's a huge risk on their part if they want to keep the power. They can't make everybody band together.
It's almost as if that measured degradation of our rights and liberties it got accelerated. And I'm not going to describe why I thought it was accelerated, but I think it was accelerated. And now because it was accelerated, more and more people are waking up hey, what's going on here?
Too much too fast.
It's way too much too fast.
Yeah.
And you see more and more people that 5 years ago would have thought I was crazy for saying some of the things I do, that are now you know what? I kind of see what you're saying. I don't like it. I'm going to reject that notion because I think that's too far. But those are the folks that are almost waking up. They're kind of stirring.
Yeah.
That was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast.
Yeah.
I have some harebrained schemes about what's really going on. Not going to go into that now, but the timeline was accelerated in order to get us under the yoke of complete tyranny.
Yeah.
And then we're the point where we would not have any recourse.
Yeah, there's nothing.
It was the purpose of that was to wake us up. Somebody accelerated the timeline. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah.
Thankful to individuals. I'm thankful to God for that, because things are going to change, hopefully, pretty soon, and enough people will wake up and say, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
Throw off this yoke of tyranny that you didn't even know you had because you were so distracted with bread and circuses.
Yeah. And Instagram.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's circus.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's circus and TikTok and all the other stuff.
Yeah.
So
good deal.
So anyway, that's it. Please do your own research. Don't trust everything I say. Look into the Federalist Papers. There were several books that were a conglomeration of the anti-Federalist Papers. They weren't as no shock. I won't waste a surprise face emoji on this. The anti-Federalists didn't congeal into one set of documents called the Anti-Federalist Papers because they were anti-Federalists. Where the Federalists were we need to order and structure. They were more top down.
Yeah.
So read the Anti-Federalist Papers, read the Federalist Papers, read the Constitution, read it all, and do your research.
I like it.
Hope you enjoyed this episode. We will see you next week.
Thanks, guys.